All right, we're gonna start with session 2. Sorry about the bad camera work there. And we'll go to the next level of detail once we've got the gain and the fader set for one channel. Then we just repeat that over and over again. So the next thing that we do, like if we walk in on Sunday morning, usually the worship leader has set up everything from worship night, and it's roughly mixed. But the next major thing we need to do is try to balance the mix across all these different channels so that we meet a couple of objectives. First objective is we want people to always be able to worship without being distracted by anything happening from a sound perspective. So we are part of the worship team, and it's very important to have a heart of worship as we're doing this. It's all very technical, and we're busy making the sound adjustments, but the goal is that everyone in this auditorium here would be able to enter into worship without having any distractions because an instrument is too loud, or there's a buzzing sound, or there's a squeaking sound, or something like that, which just like pulls them out of their ability to concentrate and worship, right? So that's our first objective. A couple of things that help with that, I'm going to just quickly switch to vocals. So I'll teach you how this other bank of channels works. We have groups of instruments. And so I can quickly like zone in on, if I select vocals or I select guitars, I can zone in on exactly those instruments. And the way it works is it sets up these first few channels with that group. I'm going to go back over here and press guitar, and I'm going to leave the focus here so you can see how it changes. So you can see now that it's all the vocal instruments. And when I switch to guitar, now it's switched to what we have in the guitar group, which is currently guitar and violin. Sometimes we have 2 guitars and a violin. We can change what's in this group pretty quickly as well. If I switch to keyboards, you can see we have synthesizer and a couple of piano channels, one for high and one for low. Bass has only the bass guitar. If we had other bass instruments, we could put them in here. Drums has the most channels, and this has snare, hi-hat, tom, floor, overhead left and overhead right. These two are linked together. So if I adjust one, it actually causes the other one to move. So you can see how they move together. And I had these pretty high for this last song that we did because there was a shaker that the drummer was doing right into the mic. So I'm going to just move that back down to a normal level for next time. And let me show you the rest of these. It's effects. So this is our effects. It's called FX on the board. This is how we get our reverb and delay. And you'll notice there's 2 channels for the house. This is what we hear in the auditorium. And then there's 2 channels for the live stream. And this controls the amount of reverb and delay that goes into the live stream. And so we can kind of adjust this separately. And you can see it's actually a little higher in the live stream. And we adjust that as we're doing the live stream mix, which I'll show you later as well. Okay, so we are now gonna go back to vocals, just so I can show you how we do this overall balancing. You'll see this green light is flashing right here. It's just picking up some chatter that's happening in the front of the room. But how we get people to focus on worship is we make sure that the lead vocal is the highest thing that you hear. The lead vocal will be singing the melody. And most people who don't have a lot of musical talent have a hard time if the harmony that the background singers is too high and you can't clearly hear the melody, then people lose their way and they're not able to follow along with the song. So we want to make sure that the lead vocal is the primary voice that we hear. And even above the instruments, we want it to be louder than the instruments so that people can follow along. So not too loud so that it's piercing, but just in the balance of things, we want that to be the loudest. And then we want to adjust these background vocals so that it blends nicely. Like we want it to be a fill-in that adds depth to the song, but not overwhelm the lead vocal. So it's a very fine balance. You can see that I have this one down quite a bit because he sings louder and he puts his mouth right near the mic. And this singer kind of stands about a foot back from the mic, so I have to turn the gain up and pump up the volume more for that voice to be heard. Anyway, so that's all part of the mix. So the way that I do this is I look at the stage and I look at an instrument. Okay, there's the drums. And I focus on what does that sound like? And then I go to the bass and I say, what is that? How am I hearing that in the overall mix? And then I go to the piano and I listen to each of the vocals and I look at them with my eyes and focus on with my ears what that sounds like, so that I can kind of pinpoint how well that is being mixed into the overall volume. And then I come and I make fader adjustments on that individual channel, and I can switch like to guitars and make an adjustment to the guitar. I can switch to the keyboards and then make adjustments to the piano or the synthesizer if they're here. So you just one by one go through each channel, focus in on it with your eyes, and look at it, and then try to hear it. And for example, as I was teaching someone today, we couldn't really hear the guitar. And so I just came over here to this overall mix and I just bumped up the guitar a little bit for that song, because it wasn't quite coming through. It was getting drowned out by the piano and other instruments, and it just needed a little bit more volume. So the nice thing about these groupings, there's a couple of nice things about the groupings. One, I can select at the top and then zero in on those channels. But the other thing is I can adjust the whole group together. So if I want all the vocals to just be louder, I can just move that fader up. And usually it's actually a very small adjustment that I make here. Makes a big difference, so you have to be very, very careful about how much you move this. You want to make small movements, especially when it's live. If the guitar was like, I couldn't hear it on one song, but then the next song it's kind of too loud, I can just pull down the guitar this way. And if there's multiple guitars, I can adjust that whole group. And as we go through this, the whole thing, the effects, for example, the whole group gets adjusted by this. Now, the other nice thing about this group is the way the mute works. So I can unmute all the vocals with this one button. Now let's go over to the vocals and I'll show you. This one is unmuted. And when I come over here, I can see a couple are flashing and one of them is not flashing. The flashing ones, that means that this is controlled by the mute button. So if I mute it, or oops, I'm on the wrong channel. It's not working for some reason. Oh, again, I'm on the wrong one. I was doing guitars instead of keys. So I'm pressing the mute button over here, like this. And as you see, when it's unmuted, those blinking ones are unmuted. That means they're live now. And if I mute them, then they are flashing. This means that they will be controlled by the mute. Now, if I want to include the synth, because the synth is here today, then I just press on the mute button and now it's flashing as well. And you can see it will now be part of that overall group mute. Right? And if I want to take it out because maybe the synth player isn't here today, I just make it a solid mute. And then now when I unmute that group, it's not part of the group. So this gives me a really quick way to mute a whole group. And when I switch between the speaker who's speaking the message or giving communion or whatever, and the instruments, I just quickly unmute all these groups. And then I watch to make sure the speaker has muted themselves. They usually have a switch that they can control. And this display up here will show a battery symbol right over here above the 28. You'll see a battery that has 1, 2, 3, or 1 or 2, 3, or 1, 2, or 3 bars. So you can see where that is relative to the soundboard. And this allows me to mute them if they've forgotten to mute. Maybe sometimes during communion it gets a little busy and the pastor forgets to unmute themselves. And so I can mute them so that we don't have their additional voice in the mix. And then when I switch, once I confirm that the battery light is off, I unmute them. So that I let the speaker control themselves with that mute button, and I only override it if they forget to mute themselves. And then as soon as they have remembered, I come back and unmute them so they can control when they're on or off. Then when I switch from worship to the speaker, I come through and I mute all of these channels. And now we don't get any background clicks and unplugging and all the different sounds that might happen. Okay, so that's video 2. Hope you enjoy this.